Well, we are going to dive right in and waste no more time. Thank you all again for being patient. I hope we have a good time together and we get all of your questions and answered. So I'm sure Corey has let you know to just pop in and use your Q&A icon down at the bottom of your app ribbon down there. Just tap that and we will get to your question either in the, I'll pause and answer the question, or we may defer and wait until the end of the session to do that. But absolutely, when you think of a question, go ahead and pop it in there. You don't need to wait until the end. Cool. Let me share my screen. All right, great. So I'm going to spend just a brief second here talking about who we are as a team. So with Flatiron School Product Design, who are all the people responsible for making this program happen? What are their backgrounds and what are their roles here at Flatiron School? I'm really, really proud of the team that we've built to support the product design program. So we have an entire team of curriculum designers with experience in learning design, accessible education, and product design individual contributors. And they have a combined expertise of about 30 years in the design industry, some as managers and hiring managers at some really famous organizations that you all know, like Facebook and well, now Meta. But I am the product design director, so I work with the curriculum team and the instructors to produce the content, the labs, the assessment, the student experience that you're having. We also have Dr. D. Cunningham, Anwar, Boniful Anand, and Sienna Altis. And they are only dedicated to producing great high quality curriculum content for you. Additionally, we have an entire team of instructional designers who make sure that our curriculum is accessible, that it's inclusive, and that it is uses learning science and best tools and practices for the content there. So we've got May, Abby, Christy, and Valentina. That's just the only photo I could find of May on our internal Slack channel. So that's actually, little girl is not on our team, but that was her school picture, I assume. She'd be very embarrassed to know that I was using that. And then I always love to give a shout out to our instructors. Wow, we have such a fantastic group of instructors, passionate, dedicated, really smart, good, talented product designers who love doing their jobs. So we've got Cameron, Ashley, two Ashleys, Zach, Scott, Jennifer, and Tyler. And then we've got about 8 others that are working now since I even put this slide together. They all have been individual contributors in the product design industry. So we firmly believe that you really can't or shouldn't be teaching product design unless you have been a product designer of some kind in the industry for a while. So there's a few people here who have actually graduated the product design program at Flatiron School years and years ago, left to work for some companies and loved their experience at Flatiron so much that they came back and applied to be instructors. So I know Ashley Galloway and Tyler both are graduates of our program, but from many years ago. So let's talk about product design out in the market, right? Like, why is this a role that you might be interested in having? So according to the HR forecast that was released last year, jobs in cloud computing, cybersecurity, AI, machine learning, big data, VR, AR, blockchain, video production, and user experience design are the top jobs that companies are hiring for, and they're expecting at least an 8% growth combined across these jobs in 2023. So the nice thing I think about product design is not only, of course, is user experience and product design growing in terms of job roles in the market, but product design works in all of these different job domains. So whether it's cloud computing, cyber, AI, VR, blockchain, product design jobs are in all of these different technologies and domains. So I think that we kind of have that benefit too as a design industry to see a lot of growth in 2023 and 2024 in terms of hiring. Additionally, according to LinkedIn Learning, these are the top skills that hiring managers are now screening for. Okay, not just hiring for, but now they are actively screening in early interviews and phone calls for these skills. Things like being a designer, creativity, persuasion, collaboration, and adaptability. Right? So you can think of them as top skills, soft skills, or hard skills. I like to think of soft skills as foundational skills. Because I think everybody needs these foundational skills, and they allow you to be better at your hard skills. But they're increasingly important, especially as more and more teams are working remotely. Hiring managers know that they need people who can collaborate and who can be adaptable, who have high emotional intelligence, and who are creative, curious problem solvers. Okay, and I'll say that one again. Hiring managers across the board are looking for creative and curious problem solvers. Going through an experience like the product design program at Flatiron School really helps you exercise all of these muscles, putting just the design stuff aside, okay? Just the hard skills of learning UX and UI design, putting that aside, you're also going to be exercising these muscles of creativity, persuasion, collaboration, adaptability, and emotional intelligence. All things that hiring managers have said going forward are extremely important in the technology market industry. And according to the World Economic Forum, they say that the top skills and skills groups which employers see as rising in prominence in the lead up to 2025 are things like critical thinking, analysis, problem solving, skills in self-management like active learning, resilience, stress tolerance, and flexibility. Okay, so you've got the HR forecast, you've got LinkedIn Learning, and you've got the World Economic Forum, who in different ways are roughly saying the same thing, right? These foundational skills, creativity and curious problem solving, are extremely important as we continue to try to adapt to the fast pace of new technology, new innovations, new domains, and new roles that are opening up in the market. Excuse me. Okay, so all that's wonderful. Who are the companies that are actually hiring product designers? Well, you do some research here. You can go to Glassdoor or Indeed.com. Many different websites will show you the vast range of companies that are actually hiring product designers right now. Some of the top recognizable companies that you can see here in the top 100 index are hiring in some cases hundreds of design jobs. So it's pretty cool to see the growth of this role continuing to come in companies like Walt Disney Company, Microsoft. Love Microsoft. I really champion Microsoft for their work in accessibility these days. Capital One, who we have a wonderful relationship with. Many of our graduates that I know have gone on to work at Capital One, and one is actually a design manager there. He reached out to me the other day just to say if we had anybody he could hire, so that was kind of cool. We have designers from our older program at Oracle. We have them at Amazon, at Meta, at IBM, and one at DocuSign. I'm trying to look at these different logos and see. So anyway, the point is, it's just really neat to see the range of industries and companies that are all hiring product designers right now. So some of you may be wondering, what's the job, right? Okay, you want to hire me as a product designer. What am I going to be doing day to day? Well, I would say 4 main things. Number 1, you'd be doing research. You'd be working on things like research strategy for digital products or services. You might be interviewing customers and users and trying to find out what their problems are, what motivates them to use the products, being customer and market research. You might be doing usability testing on a new feature that your design team just launched. Usability testing is a way of validating the design decisions that you or your team have made, and then coming back with scores about how usable the design changes are inside the product. You might be crafting and sending out surveys and analyzing the results. You might be doing prototype testing. You might be doing even paper prototyping. If anyone here likes to sketch, congratulations, you're almost a product designer. You're at least a tenth of the way there, because we like to test in very, very low fidelity often just by sketching ideas on an interface. So before you even have to worry about learning a big design program or design software, if you can sketch, then you're already part of the way there. So that's really cool. So what about UX design, right? We've all heard about user experience and UX design. How is product design related to UX design? Well, again, I mentioned sketching. You're going to be doing a lot of sketching ideas on whiteboards and paper. But you might also be creating these artifacts like what you see here on the right. This is a customer journey map. So this shows how customers interact with different channels in your company or different products in your company over a period of time. And the customer experience rises and falls according to where they feel supported or do not feel supported. So product designers will take research data, whether it's survey results or observational research or customer interviews, and they'll synthesize and analyze the data and create these really amazing artifacts that represent all of the data that they've collected and show where the opportunities are, right? So creating these diagrams is a big part of UX design, as well as doing prototyping and wireframing. So when you mapped out what the problem is, you're going to start thinking of solutions, right? So you've got to start creating prototypes and wireframes. Wireframes are usually grayscale representations and forms of what the solution could look like in a digital interface. You'll see some examples of those in just a little bit, by the way. All right, UI design. If any of you are into graphic design, typography and color and visual composition, product designers also learn to do a bit of this because they may find themselves actually doing finished final designs. Not every product designer does UI design, but every product designer should know enough UI design to contribute. So creating high fidelity mock-ups of the final solution and collaborating with software engineers and developers to put it into production. Making interactions and animations and deciding how the user should move from one screen to the next and what should happen there and what happens when you click this and how it takes you to the next page and what animations happen. Working with typography and color is one of my favorite things. So if you've ever been interested in how designers make use of different color palettes and schemes, then we will teach you that in our program. And then number 4, what's the fourth pillar that you're going to be thinking about as a product designer? Well, that's the product strategy part, okay? So this is working with stakeholders across the organization to seek alignment on what your solutions are and what you're going to do out in the market. You might be doing competitive analysis, okay? So you might be doing research on the other companies to understand what are their product offerings. How do they solve this problem that our customers have? Bringing that information back and using that as a way to say, how do we differentiate ourselves from the competitors out in the market? How can we as a design team stand out? How can we make our product stand out in the market? So thinking at that strategic level is part of what makes the product design job, I think, so engaging and interesting. And why, if you're a curious problem solver, then product design might really be a great move for you. Facilitation and prioritization. So facilitation is the ability to take a room of people and have them work together towards a common goal or outcome. Okay, so product designers may often find themselves in the middle of a cross-functional group of people. You might have other designers, you might have software engineers and developers, you might have data scientists, you might have product managers, you might have other researchers, right? So you've got all these different disciplines in a room together. How do they work together towards a common goal? And as a product designer, we actually teach you in the program methods and frameworks that you can use to help teams like this work together on a common issue or problem. Facilitation and prioritization, these are really, really helpful things for product designers to learn. As a way to sort of sum all of those things up, you could say that product designers can work across all phases of product development, from early exploration all the way to final execution and beyond, right? You can't just execute and be done. You have to keep learning. You have to support the product launch and everything. So they can work across all phases of product development. So let's look at our program. Now that you know a little bit more about who is hiring product designers and what the role of a product designer might be, let's look at what our program is from beginning to end. So when you sign up for our program, you can go through what's called prep. And our prep course is all about getting you ready for day one launch. Okay, so we're going to train you on the fundamentals of UX, UI, and research. You're going to spend about 40 hours learning a little bit about tools like Figma, Webflow, FigJam, just some of the tools that you're going to be using, just the fundamentals, okay? So that on day one, you're ready to hit the ground running. So once you've passed the prep course, which takes about 40 hours of work, we're going to move into phase one. This is all about UX research, and UX methodology. So we're teaching you to do credible research, synthesize that research, and then create artifacts like customer journey maps or task flows or problem statements that help you to communicate the research findings to stakeholders or to other teams, right? So you do the research, you find out what the research means, and then you communicate those research findings to other people. Okay, so that's kind of the core part of process UX. After that, process UI. So you're looking at all of the UI fundamentals that we talked about. So working with visual composition, color, and typography, and then UI patterns. So when I say UI patterns, what do I mean? Well, I mean patterns that we use every day on our digital devices that we don't really think about. Okay, so think about like how you navigate on a website, right? So the navigation bar at the top of a website, that's a UI pattern. Or maybe a data visualization that you come across, a line chart or a bar chart that you see. How does that adapt from a desktop down to a mobile device experience, right? That's a UI pattern. Or a drop down in a menu, right? When you are on starbucks.com and you're about to order your pumpkin frappuccino and you're clicking on those options and those menus slide out. Like that's a pattern that designers at Starbucks have used and optimized. So we're teaching you all these different patterns that you can use in your designs. It really made me want a pumpkin frappuccino. In Studio One, after that, you're looking at 105 hours of your Studio One work. So Studio One, we're teaching you how to design for the web, looking at information architecture, learning a little bit about HTML and CSS. But don't be scared, right? We're not teaching you to code. We're teaching you enough about the fundamentals of what drives a web page or a website so that you can collaborate and work really, really well with software engineers. So you learn just a little bit of HTML and CSS. You spend about 3 days on that. And what about designing native applications, right? What about the Android interfaces? What some of you may know is called material design. What about Apple devices and the human interface guidelines that Apple puts out? Yes, we go through all of that so that you understand what are the best patterns to use and components to use when you're designing applications that are OS specific or operating system specific. In Studio 2, you're working on a project from beginning to end, 3 weeks worth of project work if you're in the live program. So we're teaching you things like product strategy. Remember I talked about that fourth pillar about facilitation, product strategy, competitive audits, things like that. And then how to do information design, data visualization. How do we design dashboards and how do we communicate data? Also, how do we think about things like data privacy, right? How do we think about digital ethics, right? And how do we design for security and safety? So all of that falls under information design. And then finally, you're getting into the final phase of the program, which is a specialization phase. So what you've noticed is that everyone is getting the same material in the first 4 phases. In the specialization phase, you get to choose whether you want to specialize in UX, UI, or research. In fact, your entire capstone project at the end of the program is your decision whether you want to work on UX, UI, or research. So you'll be working towards defining if you want to specialize in one of those areas. Post-graduation, you're not done with Flatiron yet, okay? So you're going to continue to iterate and work on your portfolio. Immediately after graduation, you're moving into tech prep and career prep curriculum. So this is when we start prepping you for your technical interviews, getting ready to speak to hiring managers and present your work, present your portfolio. Even nitty-gritty things like designing your resume, how to position yourself in an About Me page, how to do networking at events, updating your Twitter handle, like all the things, right? Like all the little nitty-gritty things that really help position you as an ideal candidate for a product designer. And you're going to be doing this paired with a coach one-on-one. So our career service coaching team is fantastic. You get 180 days of this career coaching where you'll be meeting one-on-one. Your career coach will be looking at your portfolio, looking at your resume, giving you feedback, helping to hold you accountable and make sure that you're continuing to build on the knowledge that you worked on in the program. All right, so looking at the schedule, so I'm going to be using the live program as an example. In the live program, everyone meets usually at around 9 a.m. and they do what's called a morning stand. That's where everyone gets together. Either if you're on the New York campus, it would be in person. Otherwise, it would be in the same Zoom room with your instructor and peers in your cohort. And you all say what you intend to accomplish that day, as well as any blockers that you have, right? So it could be, I don't understand the assignment that was given yesterday and I need help, right? That would be a blocker. Or I couldn't get a hold of the user I wanted to do the user interview, so that's a blocker, right? And we help you kind of get unstuck on those things. That's your morning stand. Then you have guided instruction, which would be a combination of lecture, live and interactive workshops that you'd be working on with your instructor, and also the guest lectures. We often have guests come in and lecture to the students. Break for lunch, which lunchtime can be on your own, or sometimes everyone gets together and watches a really cool like design talk together from a conference, or sometimes just like does a fun activity together during lunch as they get to know you. It can vary according to the cohort and the instructor. In the afternoon, you come back together and you work on labs. All right, so labs are going to be independent practice where you're working on practicing everything that you learned in the morning. Right? And the labs start building and scaffolding you so that you're able to do the assessment at the end of the week. So there's an assessment at the end of every week that builds up from everything that you've learned Monday through Thursday. Right? And in the afternoon, you might be doing project work, user interviews, user testing if you're in the later phases, reading your material for the day before, and then usually there's some sort of recap or question and answer session at the end of the day. During the course, you're going to be working primarily in Figma. Figma is absolutely the industry-leading software tool for design. So we all work in Figma together. It's a live, real-time software platform that we can use. So everyone sees everyone else's work as you work through it. So even if you're not in person, you're still working like in the same space together, the same virtual space together in Figma. You also get access to Webflow, which you could build your portfolio on if you wanted. We teach you enough, HTML and CSS and some tricks in Webflow. If you wanted to make websites, then you can use Webflow to do that. The learning management system that we work through is Canvas. So that's where you're going to be doing all of your reading and submitting your assessments. And then we teach you the fundamentals of HTML and CSS in a collaborative tool called Replit. So I mentioned Figma, right, and what our class is like. So the other day I was observing a classroom of students who were working through the same design prompts together. And I just thought how neat it was watching all of them do this work while the instructor demonstrated up at the top left corner, and you can see everyone's name there working through that design problem. So that's just a real-time shot that I took in Zoom not too long ago. And of course, if you're in person, you'll be using the campus in New York as your home base. In our program, we also place a heavy emphasis on what we call ethical design. Okay, so this includes categories like accessibility, inclusive design, different ethical frameworks that we use to help you assess things like who could your product possibly harm? Who is represented in your research, or who is excluded from your research? Right? So we want you to be able to make healthy ethical decisions when it comes to these different frameworks. Respecting your users' digital well-being, right? So we've all been overwhelmed with notifications, or when apps are so insistent that we keep interacting with them, right? So that's not respecting our users' digital well-being. And then I talked a little bit earlier about data privacy, right? So I think our entire program is built on a foundation of thinking about design from an ethical viewpoint. All right, so at this point, I want to stop and start answering some questions. So I've walked you through the basics of our program, and I'd love to answer all of your questions. So I want to make sure I'm leaving plenty of time for you to ask questions. And then if there's time at the end, I am more than happy to show you some of the project work that students are working on right now. Let me pop open our QA here. Surely I have not done that good of a job to explain things that no one has any questions.
They take a second to warm up. They'll come around.
Well, while they do that, I can show some of the project work. How about that?
Ooh, we got our first question. Would a master's degree in human factors be helpful in UX research and design?
A master in human factors be helpful in research and design? Yeah, absolutely. So much of user experience design and product design is built on foundations of human factors, human psychology, architecture. So there are going to be methods that you probably will recognize as rebranded methods that was pioneered from human factors, or even like human computer interactions. The HCI is another one that people often have master's degree from that maybe want to come in and change the product design. Yes, would absolutely be helpful to you, and probably give you a nice boost, helping you get through the course. Another question here. This is a great question. What are some of the hardest parts of transferring skills and switching careers in this direction? That deserves a great answer. I'll say learning to be a designer is an exercise in becoming comfortable with ambiguity. I know from having seen hundreds of students go through the program, one of the hardest things people seem to struggle with is not getting a concrete answer. Okay? With software engineering, your code works or it doesn't. Now, your code may not work for a lot of reasons. Maybe you forgot a semicolon, right? Maybe your variable whatever the reason is, right? But at the end of the day, it either does the thing you wanted it to do or it doesn't. Product design is not like that. A lot of times there isn't a binary yes or no answer. A lot of times it's just there are many good options. It's just deciding how you choose the option to design, right? There's not necessarily a best way to design a certain thing. You have to learn to choose between a lot of good options. And it's not just throwing darts at a dartboard. You learn to make informed decisions, but it doesn't come naturally. I'll say honestly, making those kind of decisions doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. So you have to research. You have to seek out information that helps you make those decisions. But in the meantime, you have to be more comfortable with ambiguity, not getting a concrete answer. Yes, this is what we should do. No, that was a terrible idea. Sometimes there are those answers, right? Sometimes users just hate what you did and said, and it's like, no, we're definitely not going to do that. But most of the time, I would say it's a choice between a good option and a good option. Okay, so that's one hard thing. Another hard thing is something we call iteration. Iteration just means you do it again and again, and you change and tweak things while you go. But again, you do it in an informed manner. You're making informed decisions. Every design I've ever done, and I've done a lot of them, have required many rounds of iteration. So a lot of new students want to come in and just say, okay, I've designed the thing, give me a grade, right? And the grade isn't the point at all. The point is, what did you learn when you did this thing? Now go do it again a little bit better and change it a little and see what happens, right? And then what did you learn when you did that? Now do it again and change something and see what happens. And that's the only way that a product gets better, is to iterate and keep trying slightly different variations of things. And that can be hard for some people, right? They want to just like work hard and just work in a linear way from A to Z and say, okay, done. But it's not like that in reality. And then the third thing I would say is collaboration. Collaboration is the thing that will either buoy you, push you forward, keep you afloat and keep you moving, or it will be the thing that like holds you back as a product designer. You absolutely need to be comfortable inviting a diversity of opinions and ideas into your work. So we have a principle at the school, and it's called work with the garage door up. A lot of people are just very comfortable if they can kind of design with blinders on, right? And then kind of emerge at the end and say, here it is, I designed it, I finished it. Things in the tech industry are too complicated for that. You can't do that. Okay, you have to collaborate with people. So the soft skills of, and here's the thing too, a lot of people don't know that they're not good collaborators because they've never really stress tested it. It's not their fault. They've never stress tested those muscles or those collaboration skills. So it doesn't feel natural. Doesn't mean they're bad collaborators. It just means they're not good collaborators yet. So that's something to consider, like as you're coming into the program, just because you haven't had a lot of chances to work with like a team of people towards a common goal. And I don't mean like company retreats where you all run a zip line course or obstacle course. No, I'm not talking about that. Working on a complex project for an extended amount of time. If you've never done that, I would think about ways that you could start like learning about how to be a good collaborator. I mean, just read a book. Start out reading some books about team structures and collaboration. That was a really good question. I could probably spend 30 minutes just going into that question. So thank you for answering it. I mean, asking it. Okay, Natalie, I see one more question here. Does specializing in our capstone in a certain area hinder our job prospects after? No, because here's the thing. the way the capstone project is done, you can highlight a certain area in your case study from that project that is a specialization like UX, UI, or research, but all the other projects are going to showcase kind of a bit of everything. So yes, you've got the 2-week capstone project at the end, but you've also got 3 other projects you're working on through the course of the program that show a wider breadth of everything. Speaking from the perspective of a hiring manager, having hired many designers myself, I love to see that a designer can both go wide, meaning they can work in projects that have research, that have, sorry, I'm sharing my screen, so that was probably annoying. I love to see projects where they showcase that they can do research, they can do UX and UI and think about those things all within a single project. Like, that's cool. I love to see that. But then I also like to see some kind of deeper dive things where they show me like there's more to their ability to research, for instance, than just going and talking to some customers, right? So if you want to specialize in the research thing and you want that to be I'm going to call it a part of your design personality, okay? It is a highlight of your design personality. And that's actually a really nice thing for a hiring manager to see. Just because it's in one capstone project does not mean if you did research for the capstone, that you wouldn't be hired as a UX designer. So that's not the way the project is structured. Good question. Okay. Well, until other questions come in, I will walk you through a couple of the projects that some students have been working on. So I thought that would be really cool to see. This is a neat project by a student who graduated not too long ago, Justin S. And he was recently hired, and I can't off the top of my head remember what company he ended up at, but he worked on a really cool digital dashboard for an analytics platform, League of Legends. So that was a really neat project that he did and a great presentation. And there you can see some of the different components that he designed. He's a really great designer. Debbie worked on a lot of different projects here. So I think she specialized in UI design for her capstone project. And so she created interactive prototypes and tested it with users there. So you can see in the video, she's walking through the navigation in her prototype. And then we've got different projects by Milka, and she is I can't remember if she did research or if she did UX design, but nonetheless, what you see here on the right are what I refer to as wireframes. Okay, so I said I'd show you some of these. Wireframes are grayscale representations of what the finished product, how the structure of it might be. So usually wireframes are not going to be full of like color. They might use kind of more generic components and things like that. They're just supposed to indicate possibilities of how the layout of the product would work. It's a way that you can test out your ideas without fully committing to a design direction, right? Like you're not thinking about like colors and typography and visual composition and all those things. You're really just trying to get across the essence of your idea to make sure it's going in the right direction, right? So that makes sense. That's why you don't waste a lot of time. So that's why UX designers do wireframes and why they work in grayscale a lot. Not because they're boring or they can't do color. It's because why do you want to waste time throwing a bunch of color palettes together and working on optimizing the UI when you haven't even validated or evaluated your early decisions? So. And then she was working on a competitive analysis. So if you like research, then you're going to love spreadsheets because spreadsheets hold a lot of research data. And so a lot of the research artifacts are variations of like spreadsheet presentation, right? But in a more digestible manner. So competitive analysis is like that. It gives us a XY axis that we can kind of look through rows and columns to see that and compare different competitors. Let's see. Okay, no more questions came in. So I'll end tonight just by hitting on a couple of common objections. So these are objections that I hear from people quite often about why they might not be a product designer or why it wouldn't be the right career choice for them. First one that I hear a lot is, I'm not a creative type, with creative in quotes. And I say malarkey. Everyone is creative. So I love to ask people what their current occupation is. So do me a favor. I don't think I was late today, so I lament that I didn't get to do that at the end. So I'm going to do it right now. In the chat, will everyone do me a big favor and just tell me what your occupation is now, whether it's full-time, part-time, if your occupation is full-time parent, full-time caregiver, volunteer. I want to know what everyone's thing is right now. What are they doing? Social media strategist. Well, creativity abounds. Like, you have to be incredibly strategic. It's in the title of your role. But my wife works in social media strategy, and she's incredibly creative and has to problem solve constantly and think about, like, what time of day should I post this, and how is this going to land with this type of user, and how can we do this in a inclusive way? How can we say this more inclusive or something like that? Like, yeah, that's definitely customer insights researcher. So yes, you love spreadsheets. Or if you don't love them, you use them all the time. Customer insights research. You're going to do fantastic with product strategy, because you are going to really be thinking about how this new feature is going to be perceived in the market. How will users adopt this new feature? How do we prioritize a bunch of feature requests, new things that customers tell us they need or they want? We've got 10 different things that they want. How do we make a priority decision about what to start working on? Yeah, you'd be great in those meetings. Project manager for city government. Wow, Dory. City government. God bless you. Working for city government can be one of the most rewarding things. I have friends that work for city government. Work for one of the city of Chicago. Actually, he was for a while the design director for the city of Chicago. Great guy. His name's Jason. Where was I going with that? Oh, yes, project manager. Product designers work with project managers all of the time. Talking about things like scope, right? Like, how big of a chunk of work can I actually accomplish in a 2-week sprint? How do I keep a project going? How do I estimate how long this project's going to take? Right? What is feasible for me as a product designer to actually execute on and produce? That's your skills as a project. You're sort of a double threat. Okay, so project manager, all those skills are going to be incredibly useful as a product designer. And then working in city government, you want to talk about overcoming hurdles and having to collaborate, having to get through barriers, being a creative problem solver to get around old systems that have dependencies that were created in the 80s. I know working for city government. So you're an incredibly creative person. I have no doubt. Josh, director of photography. Yeah, so you've got that visual composition skill, right? You know how to frame things. You know how to orient the subject, to highlight or even what's not the word? Not de-highlight. To highlight, what's the opposite of to highlight something? Anyway, to reduce focus on a certain part of the picture. Josh, I'm sure you're laughing at me because I sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, but I know a lot of photographers, and I know that they have such a fantastic eye for what we call Gestalt principles. Okay, so if you know what Gestalt is, it's the ability to take in the whole and make sense of it, right? So how do we make sense of an entire photograph scene, right? We've got all these individual pieces. How do they come together to make up a whole image? So UI design is totally like that. We use Gestalt principles every day in UI design, breaking apart all the little pieces and making sure that the user's eye goes to the right place, that the information is laid out in an understandable and readable manner, right? So yeah, absolutely. You're a creative person. Currently in fundraising, managing financials, cultivating relationships with donors, and event planning. Yep, collaboration. So you are already stress testing those skills of collaboration, communication, probably presentation, facilitation, getting people to work together towards a common goal, getting them on persuasion, right? Is it LeQuinte? If I'm not pronouncing that correctly, I'm so sorry. But persuading people to work together towards a common goal. I like to say like 80% of product design work is communication in one form or another, right? Of course, you're learning the fundamentals of working in Figma and Webflow and learning to create all of these things and do the research. But a big chunk of the work is just communicating with people. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I did. Here's what it means. Here's what I'm going to do next. So yeah, that's it. It takes incredible creativity and curious problem solvers. I think all of you are probably curious problem solvers. So thanks for putting that in the chat. I just like to see what everyone's working on now. Another common objection, right? I don't want to code. Fine, don't. We don't teach you to code. Coding would really be more like learning something like JavaScript, Python, Ruby on Rails, things like that. Learning algorithms and functions and all that good jazz. That's not what HTML and CSS are about. HTML and CSS are really just the presentation layer of a web page. So how do you style a website using CSS? It's not really a coding language in the proper sense of coding. So that's not what you're learning in the product design, but it makes you more competitive, I'll be quite honest. It makes you stand out in a row of other product designers if you can speak to making decisions in your web designs based on what you know about HTML or CSS, right? If you understand the fundamental way that a website works, you're going to make better decisions in your product designs. So, and then I can't quit my job. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's why we have the Flex program to allow you to go through the course in a way that doesn't interfere with your job. You can take upwards of 40 weeks, I think. I'm not sure if that's the cap that you can take. The live course is 15 weeks, of course. But I know that you can go up to 40 weeks, and it may be more. I can't remember. Maybe Corey can confirm whether it extends beyond 40 weeks. But Flex program, we have instructors in the Flex program that you're going to be meeting with one-on-one. The only difference is you're going to be watching recorded lectures, but you're going to be working on the same labs, the same assessments, and we offer you collaborative opportunities too in the Flex program. So you can work with other peers who are in the same phase as you. You can do hackathons with software engineers, things like that, just like in the live program. So it's not fundamentally much different, except it's just drawn out over a longer period of time. I would only say, if you're considering the Flex program, think about the last time that you set a goal for yourself, like a big project or something. Like maybe you wanted to take a course on, I don't know, cryptocurrency on Coursera or edX or something like that. And I would ask yourself, did you get through that course? If you did, then you probably have you probably have the ability to sort of self-motivate and self-organize so that and to plan things out. Like I'm sure our project manager, Dory, I'm sure that you probably got through your course on cryptocurrency on Coursera because you have that skill, right? To define a project scope and to say, here's what it's going to take to get from here to there. Okay. If you're like me, I have ADHD and I have attempted to take probably 20 different courses in the last 10 years on random things I'm interested in on Coursera or edX or things like that, right? No one's necessarily holding me accountable each day to show up, uh, or to like keep going and stay motivated. So my ADHD doesn't let me do that very well. I would need something like the live program, or I might not get through the flex program. So again, it's not a yes or no. Just because you didn't get through that last course that you took on, uh, I don't know, the German politics or whatever, then doesn't mean you wouldn't be great in the flex program. But I would say do a little extra preparation and give yourself some safeguards, right? If you know that you need that accountability, what kind of structures can you put together for yourself so that you are kept on track and you continue to do the work day and day? Because success in the flex program just looks like showing up for a couple of hours each week all the time, right? Like you can't like slack off on it. And the live program gives you that accountability because you're expected to be working basically from like 9 to 6, Monday through Friday. And if you just like randomly don't show up, it's going to be a big problem in the live program. So just think about that. Okay. I don't think we have any more questions. But, oh, thank you, Corey. She says it actually goes to 60 weeks. So for the flex program, it seems like it does actually flex. You can go 20 weeks, 40 weeks, or 60 weeks, I think. So, and you can change it a couple of times during the course of the program. So if life event happens and something changes and you need to move and say, you know, I can't keep going at this pace, and you're falling behind, then you would switch to like the 40-week cadence. So it's really helpful like that because it does adapt to, you know, what your needs are, you know, that month or that week or whatever. So, all right, everyone, thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing things with me in the chat and asking some of the questions. I hope this was helpful. You can absolutely follow up with me or with Corey, joshua.robinson@flatironschool.com. Easily find me on LinkedIn or even Twitter. Would be happy to answer your questions and engage with you with whatever you need. So if you're signing up to come on board, you'll be seeing me again. So I hope you do. But otherwise, everyone have a really wonderful, safe evening and have a good one. Bye.
Good night, y'all.